Was that big enough? Now I feel like I'm not a good clapper. What a way to start the show. Well, welcome to the Sandhills Podcast. My name is Pastor John. I am the online ministries pastor, and this is our shot at a podcast. And our first guest, the Reverend Dr. Pastor Jeff Philpott.
Hello, John.
Hi.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Which is weird to say, considering this is...
Yeah, I'm glad I hired you so you could interview me.
This was great. What a wonderful decision you've made. You're really seeing the return on investment here.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, so part of this is just for us to talk about relevant topics. You know, the world's happening so quick. Information is passing by so fast. So many major events happening that you can't possibly address everything on a Sunday morning.
Right.
Especially things, I mean, if you're writing a sermon all week, something happens on Friday, that's hard to adjust to.
Right.
And so part of the purpose of this is for us to maybe go back and look at some things, talk about them, maybe look to the future, see, you know, what could be the outcome of these things that have happened, and then also just respond as things happen.
So we should point out, probably, should we look at the camera? Should I look at you?
It's a little bit, but it's whatever you feel, either one.
So I'm thinking this. So one thing we should point out is, you know, the idea is we want to interact with these topics. Mm-hmm. So we're going to, this will continue on in a number of episodes. Tell us more about your vision of this podcast thing real quick.
Well, when I was thinking about it, as I was, you know, what kind of things can I be doing with online ministry? How can we grow that as a church, especially amidst COVID? You know, these were the big topics we were talking about 6 months ago. And how can we continue to, you know, encourage, engage, edify, energize? How can we use all those E words to really come together on the internet? Yeah. But that's an I. But I always think of the Explorer from Internet Explorer, so that's an E. But I was thinking, how can we utilize this? I thought podcast would be cool.
And so the thought is we're going to have like a bunch of different guests on here, right?
Yeah, different guests. We're going to have 2 seasons a year, 15 episodes each. So 30 weeks out of 52 in a year are going to be our seasons.
Okay.
Right. So that'll give us a lot of time to talk about interesting subjects, things that need to be talked about in our society, or things that need to be talked about in kind of church culture, or just things that probably should just be talked about, period.
Right.
You know, no matter what background you're from.
And so today, just for clarity, like I don't know the questions you're going to ask me.
He doesn't. So I did not prep him.
He did not prep me, so I'm totally winging this today. I hope I don't mess it up.
Yeah. This will be great. Yeah. This will be great. So the first question, if you could please state your name for the record.
My name is Jeff Philpott.
Jeff Philpott. Excellent. And mine is John Dabex. And look,
you know, because people always wonder who you are. They want to know who you are. They're like,
that happens a lot.
Who's the new John guy?
Like, who is this? Yeah. What is he doing in the church? Who is this that keeps commenting in the chats on our church online?
We wondered that too.
Who is this? We're like, and then I just showed up and I'm like, I'm going to interview you today. It's my first time in the church.
Welcome.
No, this is, I've been here 3 months.
Don't ask
September?
me. I don't know.
3 months. 3 months. 3 months. Yeah, I had to check with our 3 months. 3 months. We'll say 3 months. But it's been awesome. And so this is an exciting part to also put, like you're saying, a face to the ministry.
Sure.
And something that people can log into on YouTube and see this and get to watch our engagement, or they can just tune in.
Sure.
However they listen to podcasts.
Right.
This will be there.
That's great.
So first question was perfect. You nailed it.
Whew. Okay, that was a hard one.
That was a good one.
I hope they don't get any harder.
Yeah. So here we go. In your opinion,
yes,
what do you think was one of the worst parts of 2020?
Well, I like in your opinion, because then I can say anything.
It's true.
You know, there are so many things in 2020 that were just overwhelming to me. I feel like, in general, it's like we were all trying to take a test for which we had neither prepared nor studied, and we had to come up with the right answers. And so whether you're trying to manage your household or your child's education, or in our case, the church, you've got to figure out a way to do this now in a way that you're not allowed to interact in ways that you used to, or in ways where you don't interact at all, and you got to figure out a way to do this remotely. And the strain it has put on everybody, from the working person, especially somebody that worked at a restaurant or some other hourly job where those just shut down, or just even the strain on us who have a service-based ministry, but you can't talk to the people in general like you used to. and you lose, like in our case, maybe 2/3 of your people that we just haven't seen. Like if you ask me how many people go to Sandhills now, I'll be like, I don't know. I don't know how many we have anymore. So I think what COVID has done has been a really horrible thing. And then, layers, it was like a bad parfait, because it was like just layer upon layer of really painful and difficult things in an election year, in the midst of, racial tension. I think there's just been a lot of things this year that have been really cruddy. But if you want the worst, I think it's what COVID has done, and then the ripple effects, from that stem from that.
Yeah, that's definitely been so difficult talking about. Our whole job is based around engaging people,
right?
And the way we've done that for 2,000 years,
right,
is gather people together and talk,
right?
Whether it's, we're going to sing, or we're going to hear a sermon, or we're going to have a small group and we're going to talk about these things. We're going to engage with each other, and we're going to have community. To then have a situation like this happen, unprecedented for our generation.
Right.
And I mean, we had this, 100 years ago with the flu, but technology, everything's changed.
Right.
Even those people that had the flu could look back and see more similarity to things in the past for them, whereas for us, it's much harder.
Right. But in some ways, it's been better too.
Yeah.
Because 100 years ago, how would you have still tried to connect with people?
Exactly.
I mean, I know we're all sick of Zoom. Those of us that have had to do it for months now. But what a great tool to be able
Absolutely.
to do that. And the same thing with the mobility we have now with our cell phones, and in other ways we're allowed to connect digitally that they didn't have 100 years ago. It's been fantastic.
Yeah. So it's unprecedented in that sense that we can't look back and be like, oh, we'll just do it like they did it, because we're like, wow, we can do a podcast.
That's right.
We can do a Zoom call. We can do all these things in like the church online platform that we do. But even that difficult, because you're saying, we're not sure how many people we're getting to,
right?
Because we only see when someone logs into church online, we see that it's one screen. We don't know how many people are in the room watching.
Right.
Because we had 460. I think there was an updated number. I checked the stats again. 460 for Christmas Eve.
So that's households, which could be, and I know our household, we had 6 people watching.
And we had 6 in mine.
Yeah. So you're like, oh, wow, that could be a lot of people.
That could be a lot of people that were reached.
It's so weird though, because when we were doing the initial, where we were doing the videos, like I was preaching to an empty room, like on a camera. I mean, you see, I'm an interactive person. I know I tend to be jokey, and I don't know, is that a word? I tend to be.
We'll let it pass.
Yeah, I add humor.
I'll allow it.
But when you add humor and nobody laughs, you're like,
that's tough.
And so actually, what I started doing, if you watch those, is I just started pulling out a lot of the humor and the jokes, because I just didn't know how to make them, work, and I wasn't sure if they were, going well. I couldn't tell if I was a good preacher anymore. So I was just like, so I just kept going and did what I did. And we would finish filming and people would say, well, how'd it go? And I'd be like,
ask me next week.
I know the content was good. I used the Bible, but yeah. So that was weird, but like a flip side thing too. But now people are engaging our church, and I would assume churches throughout the world, not just Sandhills, but engaging church who maybe didn't before. I don't know if it's safer or they were recommended, or I've got family members who watch us now consistently, and we are now considered the church for a number of people that will never be able to come here, at least with any consistency. Now, that also has a problem, because church by nature is relational. And so when the COVID thing finally dials back, and hopefully we get some, stability again relationally, what happens to them? And, my encouragement to them would be, please find a local fellowship, plug in, find people you can interact with and shake hands with and hug and, share a potluck with,
Yeah.
But, it's a different day.
So that segues, I think, nicely into this aspect of global Christianity and American Christianity and things that we've seen with that. How do you think that COVID has impacted the landscape of American Christianity?
That's a good question. Well, first of all, you've got to get past the natural division that occurred. Generally, I think, since this is opinion, along political lines, where you had, some who were like, this is going to kill people, stay home, which is legitimate, of course, to others who are like, the government wants to control us. This is all a ploy. Let's, we don't have to do this. Let's rebel. Burn our masks. So you kind of get this odd tension going on, and then like for some, and this was, a charge levied at us that in some way, by continuing to meet, we were acting unwise. And then when we ask people to wear masks at the church, they say that we're giving in to external pressures.
Right.
And so there's no win in this entire thing. And so you've already got a division that you start off with right away. And then a number of churches didn't meet for a while. Some still aren't meeting. And so that's a problem as well. And so the way Christians view each other, the way they view their experience. But my biggest concern, I would say as a pastor, this is my pastoral concern, is that because now we're legitimately missing a relational aspect that was there previously, or let me just say this, was available previously, even if not everybody availed themselves of it. And since Christianity is all about relationships, not having people you can sit down and share a cup of coffee with or talk to, or feel like that environment's been shut down. And a great example for us is we normally have a small group ministry that's just a ton of small groups and people gather.
Vibrant.
Yeah, hundreds of people get together. And so we start the ministry trying to do a version of it, and just hardly anybody participates. And so they're just afraid to get together, which to me shows that the mark of COVID is the mark of the enemy, in the sense that the outcome of COVID has been division and fear and suffering and death, all marks of the enemy. And so for me, it's like he has really used this to attack, I think, the church. Here, a concern I have too is, so what happens when we move past this, let's say, and if it's 6 months, a year, whenever we're finally past this, so to speak, are people coming back, or has it put such a fear now of interacting with people? I mean, what people are going to have long-lasting effects, kind of PTSD from COVID after it's over, relationship. I mean, I was in went to the post office the other day, and as I'm standing, it's got the little squares, stand 6 feet, in these little boxes. Yeah. And so I stand in the square, and this lady in front of me is in a square. But then I realize I'm kind of in front of the doors when people are coming and going. And so I step forward a step just to not be in the way of the door.
Clear the way. And
the lady turns around to me and she's like, what are you, like kind of shooshes me back. Well, then I'm like, yo, lady, what's, and so then I'm like, oh, now I look like one of those jerks. But it was just this whole, like, she was just deathly afraid. And I had a mask on. So, but she's just deathly afraid. And I was just like, wow, what carries over for her in that, or for others in that? And again, not to minimize any of this. I think this is all legitimate. I think this is all real. I think we should all wear masks, all that kind of stuff. But it's just one of those things where I think it's got some long lasting damage that's going to come out of this.
Yeah, it's difficult to think, because I was watching a news coverage. They were running a story on this, and there's been more hospitalizations for mental illness this year than there ever have been before. And it's because there's so much isolation that it becomes lethal in a different way.
Sure. Oh, there's no escape. I was talking to a fellow this morning. He's a good friend of mine, lives out in Oklahoma, and he said 2 of his family members go through severe depression during this time, and they're homeschooling. So everything's online. I mean, they're not homeschooling. They're at home doing school online, and then the mom now is working from home, and he has been doing more work from home. So they're all cooped up together. It's a bigger family, and you can't get away from each other. And there's something about a Sabbath from even those you love. And so, I mean, my wife delights when I leave for work and when I come home. It's just one of those things, and that's healthy. So, and
those things were so many outlets for that. Whether it's soccer practice for the kids to get some of that energy out, or meeting at school, going to gym classes, all that's taken away as well. Right. So it's you miss so many outlets for those family members as well. And so then we take these things and we think, well, how can we try and reach them still and provide some kind of rest at home? And so that's, the heart behind our online ministry. And as we've seen this, just as you were talking about, you see so many people divided along lines of politics or how they're responding to certain things. What has 2020 done for your perspective of American Christians? Like, what some things has your perspective changed at all? Like, you thought American Christians were maybe this way, and then 2020 has changed that or confirmed anything?
I don't know, because I don't know that difficulty produces a lot of change by way of character. But what it does, I think, is it reveals, and what formerly was a perhaps veneer of civility has been eroded, I think, by the challenges of COVID-19. And so I think our own pain we project onto others, and we hold others accountable for it. And so I just think, your average Christian probably doesn't know what to do. They're probably challenging. They're challenging the Lord a little bit personally, and they're just trying to figure out how to be a godly person in this day and age right now. And I think just sometimes because you don't know the right thing to do, you just do what sounds like it's normal or natural or what is before you. And so you're acting with your family in a new way. You're interacting with your neighbor in a new way, so to speak. Your church you're interacting with in a new way. And then with the heated debate of the election that went through, that was just another element. And then again, with the racial tension, I think it's revealed who we really are. And I'm not sure probably we should all like what's been revealed.
Yeah. Do you think that the church handled the kind of the church broadly speaking, the American church? Do you think that it seems like people's perspective of Christians has gone up or down through this year?
That's a good question. Yeah, I don't really know what I would say about it. It's been such a hard thing, I think, for people. Like, I'm a church leader, and even I'm trying to figure out, how, like, if you were to ask, like, how have you guys done, or how do you think the American church has done, during COVID-19? I would say, yeah, I have a lot of respect for everybody. For the guy who's still trying to make it work, to the guy who said we're not going to meet again. Like, these decisions are so hard, and people will never understand it. It's so easy to be an armchair quarterback and go, well, if I were doing this, and how you should be doing this. Like, you have no idea the complexity of the decisions that are before us, that we're weighing, that we're trying to figure out. Weighing the thing too, that, like, hey, if things go south, or if somebody gets infected, or if you have a kid come in with COVID and it spreads to all your children's, you're like, we're all thinking that stuff. And so I just have a lot of respect for people who are trying to make these decisions. And so actually, for my part, I've been really non-judgmental of my brothers and sisters in Christ, and that goes to families too. So for the family who says, I have a grandmother, or a spouse, or even a child that's immune compromised, and so I'm just trying not to be around anybody. Like, I totally respect that. I would never say otherwise. Or for the person who comes with their family and they're masked up and coming to church and they're sitting here and trying to abide by all the rules. Like, I have a lot of respect for them as well. This is just really hard for all of us, and so this is one of those times for me where grace has been manifested, and I just want to embrace that. So I hope we'll be like that. But I think it's probably revealed some of our own personal character struggles.
Absolutely. And that's definitely, as I've been thinking about it and praying about it for 2021, just around the corner, how can we be the peacemakers in society as Christians? How can we love our neighbors? And you think about, everyone always grows up with the golden rule, treat others as you'd want to be treated. But then to think that Jesus said, I'm doing away with that one. You're going to love others as I have loved you, which is even more than you could love yourself, which is an amazing, concept to think about, that I'm to love others, no matter where they're from, the same way that Jesus loved me. And in 2021, I'm really hoping that American Christians can take that to heart and think, even if my neighbor is from the different end of the political spectrum, even if they have completely different values, I'm still going to love them and show them grace and compassion and friendship the way that Jesus did for me. And so that's something I'm very hopeful about, that we can step out. And that's something I've loved about our church, is our emphasis on community engagement and being peacemakers in our city.
Well, and, talking about the community's perspective, neighbor's perspective, this is the time to love your neighbor, because you're at home.
Absolutely.
And so you're at home, they're at home, you see each other all the time. What a great way you can share things, be there for each other. You can be the church.
Yeah. Absolutely. And this was something, so I grew up in the military community, and something that I was very used to was whenever you would move into a house, someone from the neighborhood's going to come by and bring you some cookies, something like that, which was not great for me as a jolly young child, because I would eat all the cookies very quickly. But it was just kind of that hospitality, and thinking, how can you do that today? Well, you probably don't just walk up to someone's door, because you don't know what could be on the other side, how they're going to react. But you could leave something, and you could say, hey, wore gloves, bringing this over. It's baked, so that's obviously going to be cooked, and it's clean. But just little gestures or things like that. Or we even had a neighbor drop off a postcard in our mailbox instead of coming up to the door, and it was just like, wow, that was so kind. Just write a thoughtful
encouraging note.
And I was like, wow, that's really. I live in a cool neighborhood. Like, this is awesome. And so you're absolutely right. There's so many ways to engage our neighbors with the love of Christ that doesn't even necessarily look to them like evangelism. They're just like, wow, my neighbor's so kind. And then that leads to, why are they doing this? And then hopefully that leads to a conversation, and down the road, then they say, well, the heart of all this was loving you like Christ loved me.
Amen. Yeah.
And they're like, well, who's this Jesus guy? And they're like, have I got a story for you?
If only it always worked that way. Wouldn't that be great?
Wouldn't that be awesome?
Tell me more about Jesus.
Tell me more about this guy. And you're like, well, great. I wasn't expecting it to go this well. So we've talked about kind of the politics, American Christianity, so many challenges. If you could say kind of one thing, point blank, to every American, you'd know they'd hear it.
No, every American, or every Christian, or every American Christian?
Ooh. We'll go with every American.
Okay.
And then we'll go with every American Christian. if you could say one thing to them, what would you say to the American first?
To the American. This is good. You know, so we are marked by our independent spirit. I mean, that is how we're wired. But what makes us strong can actually be our greatest weakness, and that independence can turn into division and bitterness and hate. And I think that's where we've ended up in a lot of this. And I think it's exacerbated by the blanket of COVID that's around everything. So you're tense anyway, you're angry anyway, you're frustrated at the world anyway, you have nobody to blame. And so if you can just find an enemy, you become all the more volatile. And I'm concerned about that. So if I could say one thing, like, could we work together? Look, we can stop identifying who's the bad guy here, because everybody thinks the other guy is. And truth be told, we probably all have a little bit of that in us. So how about we can stop that for a little bit and just identify, okay, you don't like me as much, I don't like you as much. I get that. Can we work together to make this a better place, so that we can be who we want to be? So my dream is to see, if I could go back to American politics, like people on the opposite sides of the aisle begin to work together. Yeah. But the problem is when they do that, they lose their constituents, because their constituents are the armchair quarterbacks who are funding their campaigns or telling them what to say and to do. And so like the whole system, the whole American system its independence is a broken independence. So it's almost like you can't work together. You have to villainize the other side. And how do you move forward with that kind of progress? So I think it's an inherent problem in America, not just the
Absolutely.
church.
And it's that idea of, look, the person you think is your enemy, give them the chance to be your friend.
Right.
Give them that chance. Yeah. See what happens.
Well, so I have a good friend of mine. I have a lot of friends who vote different than I do, think different than I do. And so I was talking to one of them one day, and he's very outspoken politically. And we were just processing, like, how would you handle this issue? And so he was sharing with me like what he was thinking about it, and I was thinking, well, how would I handle that issue? And so we had this conversation. I thought, man, if that could just happen in the political sphere for real, where you got two people who are like, hey, let's solve this issue together. And here's the deal: I know I got to concede on some stuff, and you'll have to concede on some stuff, but maybe we could work together to make some great things happen. Now, I do think at the end of the day, that's what makes America great, is that we can kind of have that. And it is probably dangerous to have one side dominate the whole thing. So it's helpful to have other perspectives, but I just wish we could work more in a spirit of cooperation.
Absolutely. So then what would you say to the American Christian? So a little bit more about them versus just their nationality. You now know that they're someone who looks to Jesus. Yeah. What would you say to them?
Well, okay, so that would be my challenge, is to make sure you're literally looking to Jesus as your primary. Because I think probably what we tend to do is we acknowledge that we love the Lord, and we acknowledge that we love His Word and the instruction He's given to us, but then we act like the world. And you're just as divisive, just as vengeful, just as derogatory towards opponents. Your social media is just as crass. It's hideous, and I'm just like, we look just like the world, and so we're not really giving the aroma of Christ. We're just giving this stink bug aroma out to the people around us, and they're like, look, you're no different than us. And the criticism would be correct. Like, you're right. We just love Jesus. We're as bad as everybody else. And so, and I don't mean that about every Christian, just most. And so just
the majority.
Just majority. No, I mean, that's how we are. We're wired that way. And so we've got to change too. We've got to figure out how to work through some things. But you can't. It's almost like you can't talk people out of it.
Yeah, and it's you think about that verse, that says, if you're saying these things without any love, you're just a clanging cymbal. Right. And you really think about the difference between how sweet a bell can sound and how outrageously annoying a clanging cymbal can be. And you think, well, let's be the joyful noise. When people hear us speak, we want it to be edifying. Right. We want them to be encouraged. We want them to want to be a part of us. We want this family to grow. Sure. And so I think that's absolutely true. Is like you're following Jesus. You're a Christian. You take His name. Let's act like it. Let's love our neighbors the way that He loved us. Let's be the peacemakers. Let's go out and love our neighbors and really show them that there is something different about the community of Christians.
Yeah, amen. And you don't have to sacrifice truth to do that. I mean,
absolutely,
just be as wholeheartedly, loving the Lord and about His commandments, and still go out and challenge the world. So yeah.
And that's also a really cool thing that I've always found fascinating about Christianity, is we have the ability to integrate so easily into communities. It's our faith is not one that's ethnocentric, right? But global Christianity is so focused on, I'm going to go out, I'm going to meet you where you're at, And Jesus is going to meet you where you're at, but he loves you enough to not leave you there.
Right.
And to take you on a journey of rebirth,
Right.
becoming a new person,
Right.
marked by love and marked by Christ. So it's exciting what could happen in the future. We'll see. This has been really great conversation. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me here. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me here as well. As well.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. And there's so much of other stuff we could have talked about, but I know we're out of time. But I think at the end of the day, if we can just figure out how to love Jesus and love each other, which, by the way, I think are some pretty important things that Jesus may have commented on at some point.
It's written.
This is written somewhere.
Heard somewhere.
But I know it's great. Whatever it is, it's great. But no, we need to. If we could really just focus on that, I think you begin to solve a lot of the problems. And we've got to engage directly some of the debates that are around us from a biblical worldview, not from a politicized biblical worldview, which is what we tend to do. Yeah.
Absolutely. Say it louder for the people in the back. Well, excellent. Thank you so much for being on the show. This has been great.
Thank you.
Thank you all for tuning in, and whether you're watching this on YouTube or whether you're just listening, we really appreciate it. If you could share it with your friends, if you could like it, subscribe to it, that would mean a lot to us. We want to keep engaging and encouraging you wherever you're at. So thanks so much. God bless. Have an awesome day.